Hi there, everybody. Today we are talking about being the default parent and what that does to our feelings of self-worth. Let's get into it. Welcome back to your Emotional Support Podcast. I'm your host, Noelle, and today we're talking about what it means to be the default parent, the one who remembers everything, handles everything, and is expected to always be available. And most importantly, we're talking about how this role affects your self-worth and how to reclaim parts of yourself beyond always being the caretaker. So let's start out. What does it mean to be the default parent? I feel like this is kind of a new term that's being, put out there a lot lately on social media, and I've seen it on a couple of different news programs, like the, morning news shows, whatnot. But what does it really mean? Okay, so this being the default parent means that you're the one that they call when someone's sick, like at school. You know the teachers' names, you know all the shoe sizes, you know how their, morning went, their emotional states, what their snack preferences are. You know everything about them, and you are kind of the one who keeps track of everything. But also, like, this is the example that I use. Like, my husband and son are sitting on the couch. It's summer, right? I'm doing stuff upstairs, maybe laundry or whatever, and I come downstairs and it's like 12:30 and my son's like, "Hey, I'm hungry. Can you make me lunch?" Well, my husband has been sitting on the couch with him for the last hour. I've been doing things. Why didn't he ask my husband, who's fully capable of making him lunch and willing to make him lunch if he asks? So, it's just like that kind of thing. Like the default falls on typically one parent. So it's not necessarily about doing everything, but it's about carrying that mental load also. Like keeping track of when the doctor's appointments are, when the dentist appointments are, when the eye appointments are, when the school registration needs to be taken care of, all of that stuff. It's often an invisible labor, and it's rarely acknowledged, but it's always expected, which makes it even more frustrating. So, it's just like the example that I used. Like, my kid calls me, before he calls my husband. Why? I don't know. Even if it's something that I'm like, hey, your dad, like, okay, here's another example. I was taking care of my mom after she had surgery, so I was not home. And there was an issue with something, and instead of going, down into the basement to talk to his dad about it, my son called me. There was nothing I could do about it because I wasn't even home, and his dad was right there. So, just that kind of thing, that it's just kind of like I'm expected to know all the things and take care of all the things, even when there's two of us in the house. I know there's many, many, many of you that know exactly what I'm talking about. But let's talk about how that can kind of chip away and erode our sense of self-worth. Sometimes that constant caretaking can lead to some identity loss, right? Where did I go in all of this? I remember when I first had my son, I, was doing it on my own. I chose that, right? I chose to have him on my own, and I was by myself. But instead of being Noelle with a child, it's like my identity morphed into Sam's mom instead of Noelle. And that was really troublesome to me, and I had some real issue with that. Don't get me wrong, I love being Sam's mom, and that is a part of my identity. That is a huge part of my identity, but it is not my entire identity. And I think that tends, especially when we're the default parent, that sense of self kind of, and identity kind of gets lost along the way. You also might being the default parent, you might start equating your value with your usefulness or your availability. And that is not the case, okay? Your value is not dependent on how useful you are to other people, okay? Being the default parent can also lead to burnout, resentment. It can lead to emotional depletion, okay? It definitely can lead to that, especially when you feel like your needs are always the last ones to be met, right? You've got everybody else to take care of, and then you take care of yourself, right? If you are the default parent, a lot of times you are praised for being selfless, but punished for having boundaries. Or maybe sometimes you even punish yourself for having boundaries. Okay, the key point here is that self-worth gets tied up in being indispensable, but that isn't the same thing as being valued. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to reclaim our worth beyond this default role. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you how to do that. So sometimes it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's always bad to be the default parent. There are a lot of us who are definitely like type A, and we like to be in control, and we like to know all the things, and we like to be the person that our kids come to. Okay, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that we need to make sure that if we're taking care of everybody else, we're also taking care of ourselves and reclaiming our worth in the midst of all of this caretaking for others, right? So the first step is to acknowledge what you're carrying. Make the invisible visible, even if it's just to yourself, okay? Even if you don't share what's going on with everyone or even anyone, at least acknowledge it to yourself. Hey, I am doing a lot. I am carrying a lot. And make yourself know that, because that, just knowing that and accepting it and appreciating it for what it is meaningful. Set boundaries. I talk about this all the time. It is not selfish to delegate, to ask for help, or to say no. It is in your right, and it is good for you. And I will tell you that asking for help is one thing that I am really, really bad at. I struggle with it a lot. But I would always find myself being like resentful to my husband. Well, why isn't he doing this? And why am I the only one doing that? And I had to kind of self-reflect and be like, I'm not letting him know that I need help doing this. And we have this idea sometimes, I think, that our partners should read our minds or be able to anticipate our needs without us having to tell them. And I get that to some extent, but at the same time, they need us to communicate our needs to them. Because I guarantee you that most 99% of them are willing to help us and share that load if we let them know that we need it, right? If we don't let them know, then most of them, I think, just think that we're doing what we want to do and we're carrying on just fine. Right? If we communicate that and let them know, then that helps them see what our needs are so that they can help us take care of that. Making time for identity work. Okay, we don't want our identity to get lost. So making time for who we were before we became mom, before we became wife, right? Who are we besides being the fixer, the planner, the reminder, the nurse, the chef, the therapist? Who were we before we became Sam's mom? And I really needed to take some time to get back to that, to remember who I was. I was really fun, and so who are we besides this parental role? Because we're so many more things, right? So use I matter too moments, small daily acts of reclaiming your voice, your choices, and your needs. Take time to say I matter too, even if it's just like at bedtime and your kid wants you to read them a story. Go do that. But when they say I want you to read another story, or I want you to stay in here and lay with me. Or, they ask for that extra or whatever. Say, nope, you know what? Mommy needs her time too. Or, whatever the case may be. I need my time too. I matter too. Because you do not want your kids growing up thinking that they are the center of the universe and that other people's feelings don't matter. Because that's how we get these entitled, kind of spoiled brats that we're seeing out there. I'm not saying that your kids are like that, but I'm saying that if we don't let our kids see that other people's needs matter, then how else are they going to learn that? Right? We have to help them see that. And the best place to start is to show them that your needs matter, because they absolutely do. And so I will say to my son today, he asked me, he's been wanting me to play this video game with him for 3 days, ever since he found out it was 2-player. Okay. And he's like, Mom, every day he asks me, will you play this video game with me? I don't really want to. I'm not really excited about it. Will I do it with him? Yes, absolutely I will, because I know that that's important to him. But I have things that I need to do beforehand. So today, this morning, he asked me, Mommy, will you please play this video game with me today? And I said, instead of, dropping everything and going and doing that first, I said, you know what? There are a couple of things that I need to do. How about we do it this evening after, we've both done our things that we need to do for the day? Great. Perfect. I said, because I need this time and I need to do this. Okay. So he knows that what he wants is important and I'm willing to do that for him, but also I have things that I need for myself too. So I think, like I said, that's the only way our kids are going to learn that other people's needs are just as important as theirs. And then start shifting the balance, right? Not overnight. Don't just go on strike, although I have had friends that have done that, which I think is beautiful. But just start to shift the balance with intention. Like I said, communicate. Let the people in your house know. Let your partner know. Let your kids know that you are a whole person. You are not a human utility, right? You are not a robot. Okay? You can't do it all. And then start delegating. Start asking them to help out. My son, I'll fold his laundry because he isn't real good at that. But there are some things that I've had to give up too, right? The way that he puts his laundry away, he just shoves it into his drawers. Okay? I have to let that go. I, at first, was like, oh my gosh, I just have to put away his laundry because otherwise he's just going to shove it in his drawers. I have to let that go because I have to give him some of the responsibility, right? So right now he's 10, so he can fold his underwear and his shorts and his socks and things like that. Shirts are still a little tricky for him. So I will fold those things and then he is responsible for putting that away. And I have to just either not open his drawers and look in them, or I have to just let that go, okay? Things like that. Letting him be responsible for some of the things in his world, right? This summer, I'm teaching him how to even wash and dry to use the appliances so that he can wash and dry his own stuff. He gets his own breakfast in the morning, okay? Because I'm busy doing things in the morning. So he's responsible for getting his own breakfast. And sometimes he just has cereal for breakfast. And you know what? That's okay. And so sometimes we just have to be okay with letting our kids take ownership of some of the things that they need to get done. All right, so that is a lot. Being the default parent doesn't mean giving up your identity. It means you've been doing the most and now it's time to do something for you, okay? So like I said, I'm not saying that being the default parent is bad. It's whatever you think it is. If you think it's too much, then do something about it. If you like that kind of leadership or responsibility, then great, but don't lose your identity in the meantime. Okay? Do something for you. Make sure that your identity and your sense of value and worth isn't diminished because you are the default parent. So here's my challenge to you. There's a couple of them. I want you to name one area where you're carrying more than your share and say it out loud. Own it. Okay? Own one area that you're carrying more than your share. And then ask for help or let something go. Okay? Either ask your spouse to empty the dishwasher, every once in a while, or let your kids' socks mismatch. Let them pick out their own clothes and let them, not match. Whatever it is that you feel comfortable letting go. And I know that sometimes it takes a while. My kid dresses himself. He has dressed himself since he was 3. Okay? And he picks out his own clothes. And every day I say, that doesn't match. And he says, I say, no, this is what I say. I say, that doesn't match. Are you okay with that? And he says, yep. And we move on with our lives. I'm not wearing the clothes. I don't care. It might be a reflection on me as a parent if my kids' clothes don't match, but that is okay with me because the light shines brighter in other areas of our lives that if my kids' clothes don't match, it really isn't a big deal to me. But whatever that is for you, whatever you can let go comfortably, let it go. And then write down one thing that makes you feel like you again. Something that reminds you and brings you back to who you were before you were mom, before you were, the parent, before that was your, a large part of your identity. And then schedule it. Schedule a time to do it this week, okay? I want you to do it this week. And if you want to tell me what that is and what that looks like, I would love to know what all of your past identities, what brings you back to who you used to be. Mine was really bad. I was just really deep in postpartum depression and anxiety. And I called my best person, and she brought over wine and cigarettes and Xanax. And now that was an extreme case. That was many, many years ago. That was an extreme case because I was going through some very stressful times with my son and, whatever. I don't recommend those things, but that's just an example. What brings you back to you? What makes you feel like the person you were before you had this new responsible identity. All right, so today's tip that you didn't ask for but definitely need, you were a whole person before you became the default. That person is still in there and she is worth showing up for. So show up for her. I am so glad you're here.